Ngozi loved to look at her house in the evenings when the sun set over Abuja. It wasn't just walls and a roof to her. It was a dream she and her husband, Tund, had worked hard to build. The paint was fresh, the flowers in the front yard bloomed proudly, and anyone passing by would think this was the picture of a happy home. Inside, the floors shone, the furniture matched perfectly, and family photos lined the walls. To the outside world, Ngozi and Tund had everything: a solid marriage, good jobs, and a home that whispered success. Ngozi often reminded herself of how far they had come. She worked long hours, balancing her career and keeping the home together, while Tund's friends admired him for having such a supportive wife. They laughed at dinner parties, attended church together, and hosted relatives during holidays. Neighbors admired them as the perfect couple, the ones who seemed to have life figured out. But behind the smiles and polite greetings, Ngozi started to notice little cracks. Tund came home later than usual, brushing off her questions with half-hearted excuses about work. His phone never left his side. Even when he showered, it was always face down and locked tight. At first, Ngozi ignored it, telling herself she was overthinking. But when she noticed their spare house key missing from its usual place, her chest tightened. Something didn't feel right. She couldn't put her finger on it yet, but deep down she knew. The perfect picture of her marriage was beginning to blur. It started small, little things Ngozi could not easily explain away. Tund had always been close to his phone, but now it was like the device had become a part of his body. If it rang, he would step outside to take the call. If a message came in, he tilted the screen away as though hiding it from her. Once, when she reached for it absent-mindedly, his reaction shocked her. He snatched it so fast, his eyes sharp with suspicion, as if she was the one keeping secret. That moment stayed with her, a warning bell ringing quietly in her heart. Weekends used to be their time together. They would cook, go shopping at Was Market, or visit friends. Now, Tund was suddenly busy. He always had a new excuse: meetings with colleagues, urgent trips, a cousin's birthday. But he never invited her along. Sometimes he would leave early on Saturday and not return until evening on Sunday, tired and moody, offering no details of where he had been. Ngozi tried to ask, but his answers were vague, and he brushed her off like her questions were a nuisance. The key was what broke her calm. One morning, while cleaning, she went to the drawer where they always kept their spare house key. It wasn't there. She searched carefully, checking every corner, but it was gone. She froze, her mind racing. Tund hadn't mentioned anything about taking it. Why would he? They both had their own keys. The thought of someone else having access to her home made her stomach twist. She wanted to believe it was nothing, but the feeling refused to leave. Ngozi began watching him more closely, though she pretended not to. She noticed the new cologne he wore, the expensive shirts she hadn't seen before, the way he hummed softly to himself when he thought she wasn't looking. There was a new energy in him, almost like a man in love. But it wasn't love directed at her. He seemed distant, present in body but absent in spirit. At night, he turned to sleep quickly, his back facing her, his phone tucked under his pillow. Sometimes she woke to find him tiptoeing into the living room, speaking in low tones, ending the call the moment he saw her. When she asked who it was, he said, "Just work." But the smile on his face told another story. Ngozi's gut screamed louder each day. It wasn't only the missing key or the guarded phone. It was the coldness in his eyes, the way he no longer reached for her hand, the way he avoided looking at her for too long. She wanted to dismiss her thoughts as paranoia, but deep down, she knew something dark was brewing. The home she had cherished was no longer safe. Something, or someone, had entered her marriage, and Tund was hiding it from her. The truth did not come to Ngozi in a dramatic way. It came quietly, almost casually, through a phone call with her friend Ifeoma. They had been catching up about work and family when Ifeoma's voice dropped, careful, almost hesitant. She asked if Ngozi was free to talk in private. The shift in tone made Ngozi sit up straight, her heart already preparing for bad news. "I don't know how to say this," Ifeoma began slowly, "but I think you should know. I've seen Tund around town, and he wasn't alone." Ngozi's chest tightened. She held her breath as Ifeoma continued. "There's a girl. Her name is Amara. She's young, flashy, always hanging around men with money. People know her. She has a reputation for chasing married men. I saw them together more than once, and it didn't look innocent." For a moment, Ngozi felt the world spin. She pressed her palm to her forehead, trying to steady herself. Amara. The name echoed in her mind like an unwanted guest. She had never met this woman, but suddenly she could picture her. Painted nails, loud laughter, someone who thrived on attention. The type of woman who enjoyed being seen in places she did not belong. Ifeoma's voice softened. "Ngozi, I didn't want to tell you, but when I heard her bragging to some people at the salon about a man who gave her keys to his house, I knew it had to be Tund." She described the house. It sounded exactly like yours. Ngozi's blood ran cold. The missing spare key. The late nights. the perfume that sometimes lingered faintly on Tun's shirt. It all snapped into place. Her husband hadn't just been unfaithful. He had given another woman access to their sacred space. Their home. The place they had built together with her father's inheritance. Her heart broke in waves. The betrayal cut deep, not just because Tund had chosen someone else, but because he had invited that someone into the home that represented her blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Every wall, every tile, every piece of furniture carried her effort and her father's memory. And now, Amara walked in those same halls, probably touching things with careless hands, laughing in the rooms Ngozi had once filled with love. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she sat in silence after the call, staring at the family photo on the wall. There they were, smiling, arms around each other, a picture of happiness. How quickly it had all unraveled. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but another part of her told her to stay quiet, for now. She needed to think, to gather herself. Amara was not just a fling. She was bold, reckless, and clearly confident enough to act like she belonged. And Tund, blinded by lust or pride, had opened the door for her. That night, lying awake while Tund snored beside her, Ngozi made a silent vow. She would not let this woman steal her dignity. The pain was sharp, yes, but in that pain a fire began to grow. Ngozi did not shout. She did not throw questions at Tund or accuse him of betrayal. Her silence became her shield. She smiled when she had to, cooked meals when expected, and moved around the house like everything was normal. But inside she was restless, her mind circling one thought over and over. He gave her the key. One afternoon, while Tund was out, Ngozi went to the cabinet in their bedroom where she kept important documents. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out the brown envelope that carried their property papers. She hadn't opened it in years. In her mind, everything had been settled long ago. She placed it on the dining table, sat down, and carefully untied the string. There it was, the deed to the house. Her eyes ran over the words slowly, almost afraid of what she might find. But when she reached the line with the legal owner's name, her breath caught. It was hers. Ngozi Okafor. Not Tund. Not both of them. Just her. A wave of emotion rushed through her. Relief, pride, and sadness all at once. She remembered the day she signed those papers, using the inheritance money her late father had left her. She had wanted to secure something lasting, something stable, a home where her family would always feel safe. At the time, she thought putting it in her name was just a formality. Now, it felt like her father's hand still guiding her, protecting her from beyond the grave. Ngozi touched the paper gently, whispering a thank you to him. If Tund had truly intended to give Amara control of the house, he was about to learn a painful truth. He could not give away what did not belong to him. The house was hers, legally and completely. She sat back, her mind working quickly. There was no need for screaming matches. No need to beg for loyalty from a man who had already thrown it away. The smarter move was to let him believe she was still in the dark, while she prepared her ground. She began making copies of the deed, keeping one in her handbag and another in a safe place at work. She didn't trust leaving the original at home anymore, not with a stranger possibly walking around her living room. Every day after that, she watched Tund more carefully, but not with hurt eyes, with steady ones. When he came home smelling of a different perfume, she smiled faintly and set his dinner on the table. When he disappeared for another work trip, she kissed his cheek and waved him off. He thought she was still blind. He thought silence meant weakness. But inside, Ngozi's silence was strategy. Her heart still ached, but her head was clear. She knew now that the power was in her hands, not his. The house was hers. The future was hers. And as she folded the deed back into its envelope, she promised herself, when the right moment came, she would show both Tund and Amara just how strong her silence had been. It was almost midnight when Ngozi heard the faint sound of the gate creak open. She was sitting in the living room, the lights dim, pretending to read but really waiting. Tund thought she was asleep upstairs, but she had trained herself to listen for him. The door clicked, and in he walked, tiptoeing like a thief in his own house. The moment he stepped in, the smell hit her. Sweet, heavy perfume that didn't belong to her. Ngozi never wore scents that loud, but she recognized it instantly. It was Amara's kind of smell, the type that announced itself before the person did. Tund froze when he saw her sitting there, her eyes calm, her face unreadable. "You're still awake," he muttered, trying to sound casual, dropping his keys on the table. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie hanging loose, and his eyes refused to meet hers. Ngozi didn't reply immediately. She just looked at him, steady, unflinching. That silence cut deeper than any question could. It made him fumble, shifting from one foot to another, clearing his throat as if words would save him. Finally, she smiled faintly and said, "You're late." Her voice was soft, but her eyes said more. Her eyes told him she knew where he had been, who he had been with, and what he had been doing. Tund laughed nervously, forcing confidence. Work dragged longer than expected. You know how it is. He bent down to untie his shoes, speaking too quickly, like a schoolboy reciting a lie. Still, Ngozi stayed quiet. She didn't ask for details. She didn't shout or accuse. She simply watched him, her silence louder than thunder. He mistook it for surrender. He thought her calm meant she had accepted his stories. In his mind, she was the dutiful wife who would never dare question him. Inside, though, Ngozi's heart was steady. She remembered the deed tucked safely away, the knowledge that the house he thought he controlled wasn't his at all. That secret gave her strength. She had no need to scream. Why waste breath on a man digging his own grave? When Tund finally escaped to the bedroom, mumbling something about being tired, Ngozi stayed on the couch. She could still smell the perfume on his clothes, clinging to the air. For a moment it stung her, but instead of tears, a strange calm settled over her. She realized she no longer needed his explanations. The evidence of his betrayal was everywhere, on his shirt, on his skin, in the way he avoided her gaze. As she turned off the lights and walked upstairs, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her face looked different, stronger, sharper. She thought to herself, let him believe I'm weak. Let him believe I don't see. When the time comes, the truth will break him more than my words ever could. And with that, Ngozi slipped into bed beside him, her silence wrapping around her like armor. Ngozi chose her moment carefully. One Friday morning, she told Tund she would be visiting her cousin for the weekend. She packed a small bag, kissed him on the cheek, and left with a calm smile. He didn't ask many questions. He seemed almost too eager to wave her goodbye. Inside, Ngozi's heart tightened, but her face stayed smooth. She was setting the stage, and she needed him to believe the lie. By that evening, the house that had always been Ngozi's pride turned into a stage for betrayal. Tund returned with Amara, her high heels clicking loudly on the tiles, as if she owned the place. The perfume was stronger now, filling every corner. Amara laughed as she moved around, running her fingers over the furniture, admiring the decor as if she had a right to it. "Baby, this house suits me," she said boldly, tossing her bag on the sofa Ngozi had chosen herself. "I could get used to living here." Tund chuckled nervously, pretending to enjoy her confidence. He poured her wine, but his eyes flicked toward the door every now and then, as though part of him feared Ngozi might return unexpectedly. Amara noticed but didn't care. She strutted around in her bright dress, opening cabinets, peeking into the kitchen, even stepping out into the garden. The neighbors did not miss a thing. Mrs. Beasy from next door spotted them through her curtains. Soon, whispers spread along the street. People watched Amara parading in the compound like she was the new wife. She leaned against the car parked outside, laughing loudly, speaking in a voice meant to be heard. Children playing on the road paused to stare. Women passing by shook their heads. In Abuja, nothing stays hidden for long, and this spectacle was fuel for gossip. Inside, Amara made herself more comfortable. She slipped off her shoes and lounged on the sofa, scrolling through her phone like it was her living room. Tund, eager to please, brought her food and kept refilling her glass. The more she drank, the more careless she became. She spoke loudly about how she would decorate her new house, boasting as if Ngozi no longer existed. It was shameless, and yet Tund let it happen. He nodded, laughed, pretended to agree, even though a flicker of guilt showed on his face now and then. But he swallowed it down, letting Amara's boldness take over. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed. By the second day, everyone knew that Tund had brought another woman into his home. Some felt pity for Ngozi, others felt anger for her, but most agreed on one thing: Amara had crossed a line. And as Amara sat on Ngozi's sofa, sipping wine and twirling the spare key in her fingers, she didn't know that the true owner of the house was already one step ahead. She didn't know that her little parade would soon end in the most humiliating way possible. Sunday afternoon, the street was quiet when Ngozi's car pulled up to the gate. She had told Tund she'd be gone until evening, but she had no cousin to visit. The trip had been part of her plan. Now, with her handbag on her shoulder and the original key in her hand, she pushed open the gate and walked in. From outside, she could already hear the faint sound of laughter. It wasn't Tund's laugh. It was a high-pitched giggle that didn't belong in her home. Ngozi's heart pounded, but her face stayed calm, her steps steady. She unlocked the door with a smooth turn of her key, and when it swung open, silence fell inside. There they were. Tund sat on the edge of the sofa, his shirt unbuttoned, a glass of wine in his hand. Amara was sprawled beside him in one of Ngozi's house robes, her bare feet resting on the coffee table. Her smile vanished the moment she saw Ngozi standing in the doorway. The glass slipped slightly in her hand, and her body stiffened like a child caught stealing. Tund jumped up, nearly spilling his drink. "Ngozi, you're back early," he stammered, his voice shaky. "I thought you said." Ngozi didn't respond to him. She walked past both of them with quiet grace, her heels clicking against the tiles. She placed her handbag on the dining chair and turned slowly toward Amara. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp, cutting through the silence. "Stand up," Ngozi said softly. "You are trespassing on my property." Amara blinked, confused, her mouth opening and closing like she had no words. She glanced at Tund, waiting for him to speak. He rushed forward, fumbling. "Ngozi, it's not what you think." Amara was just. "Enough." Ngozi cut him off, her voice still low but commanding. "I did not speak to you." She turned her gaze back to Amara. "I will say it once more. You are trespassing in my house. Pick up your things and leave." The room felt heavy, the silence thick. Tund tried to laugh nervously, to soften the tension, but the authority in Ngozi's tone left no space for jokes. Amara's confidence, the boldness she had shown parading around all weekend, crumbled instantly. She looked smaller, weaker, her eyes darting around for an escape. Ngozi walked calmly to the coffee table and picked up the spare key Amara had been flaunting earlier. She held it up, her lips curling into the faintest smile. "This key," she said, "means nothing here. Not in my house." Amara swallowed hard, clutching her bag against her chest. Without another word, she slid off the sofa and hurried to slip on her shoes. The proud walk she had once displayed turned into a clumsy stumble toward the door. Tund stood frozen, his mouth half open, his excuses dying in his throat. Ngozi didn't look at him. She didn't need to. With every calm word she spoke, she showed him the truth. She wasn't weak, she wasn't blind, and she wasn't afraid. The air in the living room was thick. Amara hovered by the door, clutching her bag like a lifeline, while Tund stood frozen in the middle of the room, shifting his weight nervously. He tried to speak, but Ngozi raised her hand and silenced him without a word. Her calm presence filled the house, making both of them uneasy. She walked slowly to her handbag, unzipped it, and pulled out a large brown envelope. With deliberate movements, she placed it on the dining table. The sound of the envelope hitting the wood was sharp, final, like the crack of a judge's gavel. Both Tund and Amara stared, unsure of what was coming next. Ngozi untied the string, her fingers steady. Then she drew out the crisp white sheets and spread them flat on the table for everyone to see. Her voice was clear, steady, and low when she spoke. "This house is mine." She tapped her name on the deed, the bold letters shining under the light. "Paid for with my father's inheritance. Signed legally. Registered in my name alone. This is not your house, Tund. And it never was." The words hit like a slap. Tund's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally muttered, "Ngozi, I thought." His voice cracked, the arrogance he once carried nowhere to be found. Amara looked from the deed to Tund, confusion and fear battling in her eyes. "Wait, you said." She stopped, realizing too late that the promises he made her were empty. The foundation of her little fantasy crumbled right before her eyes. Ngozi lifted the spare key Amara had been parading with earlier and dropped it onto the table beside the deed. The metallic clink echoed through the silence. She looked Amara straight in the eye. "Your key means nothing. This house does not belong to him, and it will never belong to you. You stepped into a home that was never his to give." Amara's hands shook as she clutched her bag tighter. Her painted nails tapped nervously against the strap, the boldness she once displayed completely gone. She had nothing to say. The ground she stood on had been ripped from under her. Tund rubbed his forehead, his body sagging under the weight of his mistake. For the first time, he looked small to Ngozi, smaller than the man she thought she married, smaller than the lies he had built. His pride was collapsing right in front of her eyes. Ngozi gathered the papers neatly, slid them back into the envelope, and tucked it under her arm. Her calmness was sharper than anger. "This home is mine," she repeated slowly, "and I will decide who belongs here. Not you, Tund. Not your mistress." The silence that followed was suffocating. Amara lowered her eyes, humiliated, while Tund stared at the floor, defeated. For the first time, both of them realized the truth. Ngozi was not the victim in this story. She was the owner, the protector, the one with all the power. By Monday morning, the story had already escaped the four walls of the house. Abuja has a way of carrying secrets on the wind, and this one spread faster than fire. Neighbors had seen Amara come and go, had seen her flaunting herself in Ngozi's compound, and they had also seen how Ngozi returned and ended the parade with quiet power. Whispers became conversations, and conversations became gossip. By the end of the week, even Tund's relatives had heard the tale. So when the family gathered for Mama Tund's birthday the next weekend, all eyes were waiting for the couple to arrive. Ngozi walked in with her head high, dressed simply but elegantly, her confidence glowing. Tund trailed behind her, his steps heavy, his smile forced. Everyone noticed. After the meal, when conversations filled the room, one uncle cleared his throat and said with a smirk, "Ngozi, we've heard some things. Is it true you showed them the house papers?" His words carried mischief, but also admiration. The room went quiet, waiting for her answer. Ngozi didn't shrink. She set down her glass and smiled. "Yes," she said calmly. "I showed them. because some people thought they could hand over a house that was never theirs to begin with. Laughter erupted around the table. Aunties clapped their hands and shook their heads. "Ah, Tund," one of them shouted. "Imagine giving another woman property that belongs to your wife. Is it possible to gift what you don't own?" Another cousin leaned in, grinning. "Brother, you should have checked the documents first. Now the whole street knows your wife is the true landlord." The mocking stung, and Tund's face burned red. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound was thin, hollow. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but the relatives didn't give him a chance. One after another, they praised Ngozi for her wisdom and boldness, while treating Tund like a schoolboy who had been caught stealing. Mama Tund shook her head slowly, disappointment heavy in her eyes. "My son, look at how you embarrassed yourself. A good wife stood by you, built this home with you, and instead of protecting her, you dragged shame to her doorstep." Tund shifted in his seat, sweating under the weight of every word. His pride, the thing he had carried like armor for years, was being stripped away in front of everyone he respected. Ngozi remained calm throughout, her smile gentle but firm. She didn't gloat, didn't raise her voice. She only spoke when asked, retelling the incident with a quiet strength that made everyone listen. The relatives clapped for her, calling her wise, calling her brave. By the time the gathering ended, Tund could barely look anyone in the eye. His once proud shoulders slumped as whispers followed him out the door. He had thought Ngozi's silence meant weakness, but now, in the court of family and community, he saw the truth. Her silence had been her weapon, and his pride was shattered beyond repair. Ngozi did not waste time. The very next week, she visited her lawyer and began the process of separation. There were no tears in the office, no begging for what was already broken. She came with her documents neatly arranged, the deed to the house on top, proof that her future was secure. Every signature she placed on the papers felt like a step forward, a release from chains she no longer wanted to carry. Tund tried to talk her out of it, but his words were empty. The same man who once strutted with confidence now stood deflated, his voice weak. Amara had already abandoned him, slipping away the moment she realized the house and comfort she dreamed of were never hers. Without her, and without Ngozi's protection, Tund was left with nothing but whispers of shame following him everywhere. For Ngozi, the separation was not just about leaving a man, it was about reclaiming herself. She moved with dignity, her head high, her laughter slowly returning. Friends and family rallied around her, proud of the way she had handled betrayal without losing her grace. The house remained hers, a symbol of her strength, a reminder of the father who had given her the foundation to stand tall. One evening, as she sat in her living room with the windows open and the cool Abuja breeze drifting in, she spoke words she wanted every woman to hear. Know your worth. Protect your name. No one should ever make you feel small in what you built with your own hands. And with that, Ngozi's story closed, not as a tale of loss, but as a lesson in power, dignity, and quiet triumph.